Professor Vokrith had been teaching xenobiology and comparative planetary studies at the Galactic Institute of Higher Learning for 43 years. 43 years of standing at the front of a lecture hall, watching young minds absorb the wonders of the universe. 43 years of grading assignments, drinking cold Nebulian tea and pretending not to fall asleep during his own slideshows. He had never, not once, been genuinely afraid of a lesson plan, until today. Right, he muttered to himself, standing outside the doors of Hall 7, gripping his data slate so tightly that his secondary knuckles had turned a pale, anxious yellow. Today we cover Earth. Today we cover the Deathworld. Today I explain to 23 students from 11 different species why, of all the planets in the known galaxy, this one single mudball third from its star managed to produce the most terrifyingly adaptable creatures the universe has ever accidentally manufactured. He took a breath, then he walked in. The classroom smelled like a mixture of sulfur from the Grithali twins in the back row, fresh moss from young Plyn, who always brought a potted clump of it to every lecture, and something vaguely metallic coming from Taz, a student of the Vicari species who ate iron supplements like snacks. It was a perfectly normal alien classroom smell. Vokrith found it oddly comforting as he set his data slate on the podium and pulled up the first image. A blue and green sphere floated on the projection wall. Silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. That, said Vokrith, pointing with one elongated finger, is Earth. Designation Sol 3, home planet of the species known as Homo sapiens. And before any of you says it looks peaceful, I want you to hold that thought very carefully, like you are holding a live Gorathian spark wasp, and I want you to slowly, gently set it down and never pick it up again. A hand went up near the middle of the hall. It belonged to Suvek, a Dralith student, pale-skinned, six-eyed, and perpetually wearing an expression that suggested she was solving 3 math problems simultaneously. "Professor," she said, "the atmosphere reads as 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. That is a standard class MEM breathable atmosphere. The surface gravity is 1.0 standard. The temperature range for the inhabited zones appears moderate." "How precisely is this planet classified as a death world?" Vokrith smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just watched someone confidently pick up the spark wasp. "Excellent question, Suvek," he said warmly. "Thank you for volunteering to be wrong in front of everyone." Suvek blinked all 6 of her eyes. Taz, the iron supplement student, let out a low, rattling sound that was his species' version of a suppressed laugh. The Grithe twins exchanged a glance and produced a small sulfur cloud between them, which was their species' version of whispering. Plyn quietly moved his pot of moss further from the edge of his desk, as if proximity to the projected Earth image was suddenly a concern. Vokrith clicked to the next slide. It showed a creature, 4 legs, long neck, a body the size of a small shuttlecraft, and a jaw that looked like it had been designed specifically for maximum nightmare fuel. Teeth the length of a grown Vicari's forearm, eyes that held within them the calm, prehistoric certainty of something that had eaten everything it had ever met and expected to continue doing so indefinitely. "Saltwater crocodile," Vokrith announced. "One of Earth's smaller apex predators." A very long pause filled the room. "Smaller," repeated Margot, a student in the front row. Margot was of the Quellian species, small, green, with large ears and the natural instinct to evaluate threats before speaking. She had said the word like she was testing whether it tasted correctly. "You said smaller." "I did." "Smaller than what?" "The hippo, the elephant, the rhinoceros, the great white shark, the sperm whale, the Nile crocodile, which is its larger cousin, the lion, the tiger, the polar bear, the grizzly bear, the brown bear, which is a different bear from the grizzly. Yes, they have multiple types of bear. Yes, all of them would end your afternoon without much personal effort." Margot wrote something on her data slate. Vokrith was fairly certain it was the word bears, followed by several question marks. "Now," said Vokrith, pulling up the next slide. "You might be thinking, well, Professor Vokrith, those are large, dangerous animals. Many planets have large, dangerous animals. What makes Earth unique?" He clicked. The slide showed a human. It was a woman, perhaps 1.7 meters tall, standing in what appeared to be a dense forest on a planet the students now understood to be extraordinarily hostile. She was wearing thin fabric clothing. She had no visible armor, no natural claws, no exoskeleton, no venom sacs, no bioluminescent warning coloration, no secondary limbs, no ability to fly or burrow or echolocate. She was, by every objective biological measurement, embarrassingly soft. She was also smiling. She was smiling because she was holding, with casual ease, a creature that Vokrith had just described as one of Earth's smaller apex predators. gripping it behind its jaw with both bare hands, its enormous thrashing body clamped between her arms and torso like a very large, very unhappy piece of luggage. "This," said Volkrath, "is a human. She is a wildlife researcher named Dara Ose. She caught that crocodile by herself for the purposes of tagging and studying it. She then released it back into its habitat, which means she put the crocodile back. She chose to let it go." The room was very, very quiet. "She is not considered exceptional among her species," Volkrath added, because he felt the point needed to be driven home like a spike. "This is Tuesday behavior for her. She went home after this. She probably had lunch." Taz raised one of his 4 hands. "Was she injured?" "Scratches." She called them scratches. More silence. The sulphurous whispering from the Grethali twins intensified significantly. Plyn had pulled his pot of moss entirely into his lap and was holding it. Volkrath advanced to his next slide, and this one showed something that caused an immediate, involuntary reaction across roughly half the room. A small, round, fuzzy creature with large eyes, sitting on a flat rock, looking at the camera with the expression of something that had long ago decided the universe owed it absolutely everything. "This," said Volkrath, "is a honey badger. It weighs approximately 11 kilograms. It is by mass one of the smaller animals on this list. It is also, and I am quoting directly from Earth's own biological documentation here, quote, one of the most fearless animals on the planet, end quote. And humans think this is funny. They find this creature funny. They have made it a cultural icon. They celebrate it." Suvek, who had by now completely abandoned her earlier confident posture and was leaning forward with genuine concern, said, "What does it eat?" "Anything," said Volkrath. "Anything meaning venomous snakes, porcupines, beehives with the bees still in them. It is immune to most venom. It has been documented fighting off lions. It has been documented fighting off lions, losing, being knocked unconscious, waking up, and immediately going back to whatever it was doing." He let that sit for a moment. "Earth's wildlife," he continued, "did not produce the honey badger as an apex predator. The honey badger is not at the top of Earth's food chain. The honey badger is just a creature that decided the concept of a food chain was personally offensive and has been arguing with it ever since." Margot had stopped writing notes entirely. She was simply staring. "Now you may wonder," said Volkrath, pulling up a new series of images, "how humans coexist with all of this. You may wonder how a species that is, biomechanically speaking, remarkably fragile has not only survived on this planet but has dominated it, spread across every continent, and is now, as you are all aware, a member of the Galactic Council." He pulled up a thermal image, then a topographic map, then a series of photographs that made the room shift uncomfortably because they showed environments that looked actively hostile to any form of life that valued its continued existence. Frozen wastelands, boiling deserts, dense jungles where something was clearly moving in every shadow, ocean depths that pressed down with force enough to crush most known materials. "Humans live in all of these places," said Volkrath simply. "Voluntarily?" asked Taz. "Voluntarily. With enthusiasm in many cases. There is a specific subset of humans who travel to the coldest, most inhospitable regions of their planet specifically for recreation. They call it extreme sports. They film themselves doing it. They share the recordings with other humans who watch them and say, and I am translating as accurately as I can, that looks fun." Taz set down his iron supplement. This, Volkrath noted, was a significant gesture for a Vakari. They did not set things down voluntarily. "The key," said Volkrath, moving toward the central concept of the lecture, "is not just that Earth is dangerous. Many planets are dangerous. Gorathia is dangerous. The Vakari homeworld has 3 times Earth's surface gravity and native fauna that can survive direct vacuum exposure. What makes Earth unique, what makes the humans unique, is the relationship between the planet and its dominant species." He clicked to the final slide of the section. It showed a simple graph. On one axis was time, spanning several million Earth years. On the other axis was biodiversity, population density, environmental toxicity, geological instability, and a half-dozen other variables that, on most planets, showed an inverse relationship with the rise of an intelligent species. Usually when intelligence appeared, the planet got safer as the smart creatures tamed it, shaped it, and removed the more inconvenient aspects of their environment. On Earth, the line did not go down. The planet had not gotten safer as humans emerged. The planet had gotten more dangerous, more complex, more biologically aggressive, and had kept on doing so right alongside humanity, as if the whole ecosystem was in a permanent, enthusiastic, completely unresolved argument with the creatures it had produced. "Earth and humans," said Vokrath quietly, looking at his students with an expression that had moved well past professorial amusement and into something that resembled genuine reverence. Did not stop challenging each other. They never reached equilibrium. The planet kept trying to kill the humans. The humans kept surviving. The planet tried harder. The humans adapted faster. And somewhere in the middle of all that, both sides ended up producing something that the rest of the galaxy has never fully managed to classify. He paused. Before we continue, said Vokrath, I want to show you one more thing. He clicked. The image that appeared was not a crocodile or a honey badger or a thermal map of a frozen wasteland. It was a hospital room, clean and white. And in the bed was a human, a young man by the look of him, wrapped in bandages covering perhaps 40% of his visible body, with the kind of medical equipment surrounding him that suggested he had recently been involved in something that should, by the standard biological metrics of virtually any other known species, have been fatal. He was sitting up. He was laughing at something on a small rectangular screen in his hand. This patient, said Vokrath, his voice very level, was attacked by one of Earth's apex predators 3 weeks before this photograph was taken. He required surgical reconstruction of 2 limbs and received what the Earth medical documentation describes as severe trauma to the thoracic region, which is the chest, which is where most of his vital organs live. He looked at his students. He is watching recorded entertainment and eating something the nurses brought him. He asked when he could go home. He also asked if the animal that attacked him was okay. The room was absolutely, completely, profoundly silent. Then Margot said in a very small voice, he asked if the animal was okay. He did. The animal that did that to him. Yes. Margot looked down at her data slate. She looked back up. Did they tell him? They did. The animal was fine. Was he pleased about that? According to the nurses, said Vokrath, yes. He seemed genuinely relieved. Another long pause settled over Hall 7. Suvek, who had by now filled 4 data slates with notes and appeared to have developed a mild involuntary twitch near her upper right eye, spoke with the careful deliberateness of someone assembling a thought from pieces that did not quite fit together. Professor, she said, are humans dangerous? Or are humans kind? Vokrath looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. He picked up his data slate. We will pick up here in the next lecture, he said, where I will be walking you through human conflict history, their medical achievements, their relationship with the concept of personal risk, and a phenomenon they call spite, which is perhaps the most uniquely Earth-origin behavioral trait in the known galaxy. He began to walk toward the door. Professor, called Taz, should we be concerned, as a species, about the humans? Vokrath paused with his hand on the doorframe. He considered the question seriously because it deserved a serious answer. He thought about the woman holding the crocodile. He thought about the man in the hospital asking if the predator was okay. He thought about the honey badger getting knocked out by a lion and getting back up. He thought about the graph where the line never went down. No, he said finally. I do not think you should be concerned. He pushed open the door and stepped out into the hall. Then, just before the door closed behind him, he added, so quietly that only the front row students caught it, I think you should be absolutely fascinated. The door shut. The room stayed silent for a full 30 seconds. Then Margot looked at Taz. Taz looked at Plin. Plin, still holding his pot of moss, looked at Suvek, and Suvek opened a brand new data slate and wrote at the top of it, in very large, very careful letters, 3 days passed between lectures, 3 days in which Suvek reportedly did not sleep. 3 days in which Taz consumed twice his normal iron supplement intake, which his dormitory neighbor described as deeply unsettling because a nervous vicari sounds like a slowly tightening bridge cable. 3 days in which Margot visited the Institute library and attempted to check out every available text on human history, only to be told by the automated librarian that the human history section had been expanded 4 times in the last decade and still required its own floor. She checked out 9 books. She came back the next day looking like someone had personally wronged her in a way she lacked the vocabulary to explain. Plin, for his part, had simply sat very still in his dormitory and watered his moss at regular intervals, and tried very hard not to think about the honey badger. He thought about the honey badger constantly. So when Professor Vokrath walked back into Hall 7 on the morning of the second lecture, he found 23 students sitting with the particular, focused silence of people who had been thinking very hard about something for 3 days and had arrived at more questions than answers. It was, in his professional opinion, exactly the correct state to find a classroom in. He set his data slate on the podium. He looked at them. "Good morning," he said. "I can see from your faces that the assigned pre-reading went well." Margot raised her hand. "Professor, the pre-reading said that humans once spent 4 years building trenches across an entire continent, and then stood in them throwing metal at each other. That is a simplified but not inaccurate description of one of their earlier major conflicts, yes. 4 years, closer to 4.5 for most of the participants. In trenches, in the mud, yes. Cold mud frequently, with rats. Margot put her hand down. She stared at the wall. She appeared to be processing this information at a speed that was slightly too slow for her comfort. "Let us begin," said Vokrath, pulling up the first slide of the day. The title of the slide read, Human Conflict, a brief and thoroughly incomplete history. Below the title in smaller text was a note that read, Note, brief here means we will be covering approximately 4,000 years in 90 minutes. This is not a course on human military history. This is a course on understanding why humans are the way they are. These two things are, unfortunately, deeply connected. Vokrath had written that note himself, at 2 in the morning after his 4th cup of Nebulian tea, and he stood by every word of it. Humans fight, he said simply. This is not unique. Many species fight. What is unique is how humans fight, what they fight about, and perhaps most importantly, what they do after they are done fighting. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a timeline so dense with events that several students instinctively leaned back from it. Humans have been in continuous documented conflict with other humans for roughly 10,000 years, said Vokrath. During this time, they have developed, by conservative estimate, over 100 distinct methods of organized warfare, over 2,000 individual weapon systems, and a military philosophy literature so extensive that the Galactic Archive has classified it as its own academic subdiscipline. He paused. They have also, during this same period, built hospitals, schools, agricultural systems capable of feeding billions, musical traditions of extraordinary complexity, philosophical frameworks, legal systems, architecture, art, poetry, medicine. He looked at his students. At the same time, he said, they did all of it at the same time, often in the same century, often in the same city, sometimes in the same building on different floors. Suvek's upper right eye had developed a companion twitch in the lower left. She was writing so fast her data slate was registering a temperature warning. The important thing to understand, Vokrath continued, advancing to a new slide that showed a simple diagram of a human brain, which was in Vokrath's opinion an alarmingly small organ to be responsible for all of this, is that humans are not violent because they are primitive. They are not kind because they have evolved past violence. Both impulses exist, fully formed, fully functional, right next to each other at all times in every single human being on the planet. He tapped the diagram. Neurologists have a term for this. They call it the dual process nature of human cognition. What this means in practical terms is that a human being is entirely capable of rushing into a burning building to save a stranger, and then coming home and arguing loudly with a neighbor about a property boundary dispute for 6 consecutive years. The same brain, the same afternoon in some recorded cases. Taz raised 2 of his 4 hands. Professor, which behavior is dominant? Neither, said Vokrath. That is the point. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a photograph. It was a black and white image, old by the quality of it, depicting a scene after what was clearly a significant battle. The ground was torn. The sky in the background was smoke gray, and in the middle of the frame 2 soldiers, one from each of the opposing forces based on their different uniforms, were sitting together on a broken piece of wall, sharing what appeared to be a very small amount of food between them. They were laughing. This photograph, said Vokrath, was taken during one of Earth's largest recorded conflicts. These 2 men had, hours before this photograph was taken, been actively trying to kill each other as part of opposing military forces. After the immediate engagement ended, they found themselves stranded in the same location waiting for situation reports. One of them had food, the other did not. He let the photograph stay on the screen, so the first one shared it, said Vokrath. And they talked. For approximately 4 hours, according to the written account one of them left behind. They talked about their families, about food they missed from home, about a card game they both happened to know, and then their respective units arrived and they returned to being enemies. Did they survive the war? Asked Plin very quietly. Vokrath looked at him. It was, he thought, exactly the right question. Not the military question, not the strategic question, the human question. The one who wrote the account did, he said. He wrote about the other man in his memoirs. He described him as a good person. A good person who happened to be on the other side. Plin looked at his moss. The room was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it actually was. Then Vokrath clicked to the next slide, and the mood shifted sharply because the next slide was titled Human Spite, a force with no known galactic equivalent. And yes, that heading is serious. Several students sat up straighter. Margot flipped to a fresh page. Now, said Vokrath, with an energy that was slightly different from his usual lecture tone, something that suggested he personally found this part of the subject both alarming and deeply compelling, we come to what I consider to be the single most uniquely human behavioral characteristic in the known galaxy. Something that has no direct equivalent in any other documented species. Something that your pre-reading almost certainly did not prepare you for. He clicked. The slide showed a simple definition. Spite. The willingness to accept personal cost or harm in order to ensure that another party also experiences cost or harm even when cooperation would be objectively more beneficial for everyone involved. Most species, said Vokrath, have self-preservation instincts that override irrational behavior when the personal cost gets high enough. If it hurts you more than it hurts them, you stop. This is basic evolutionary logic. This is how the galaxy works. He pointed at the definition. Humans do not always do this. He clicked to a new slide showing a documented historical account, and he read from it directly. During a recorded commercial dispute in Earth's recent history, a business owner facing financial ruin due to a larger competitor's predatory pricing strategy was offered a settlement that would have saved his business and provided a comfortable outcome for all parties. He rejected it. When asked why, he stated, and I am quoting the court documentation here, that if he could not win, he was going to make absolutely certain that they felt him on the way down. Vokrath looked up. He then conducted a series of business maneuvers that cost him everything he owned. He lost his company, his property, and most of his savings. The competitor, however, sustained damage that delayed their expansion by 3 years and cost their senior leadership their positions. He paused. When interviewed afterward, the man described the outcome as worth it. Another pause. He was smiling when he said this. The room made a collective sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite silence. It was somewhere in between. It was the sound of 23 students from 11 different species encountering a concept that their neurological architecture had not previously prepared them for. Suvek set down her data stylus. She picked it back up. She set it down again. That is, she said slowly, not rational. No, agreed Vokrath. He gained nothing. Less than nothing, technically. Then why did he do it? Because, said Vokrath, it was not about gaining. It was about the principle of the thing. And humans, when operating on principle, become entirely capable of ignoring outcomes that would stop any other known species cold. He let that settle. Now, before you conclude that this makes humans unstable or dangerous in the irrational sense, he continued, I want to show you the other side of this characteristic because spite, as humans experience it, is not separate from their capacity for generosity. It is made of the same material. When a human decides that something is worth personal cost, they go all in. That is true whether the thing they are committed to is destroying a competitor, or protecting a stranger, or spending 20 years doing a job that pays almost nothing because they believe it matters. He clicked to a new slide. It showed a medical facility, clean, modern by Earth standards, located in what the caption identified as a remote region with no nearby resources, no profitable patient base, and significant logistical challenges. The doctor who had built it had been offered 3 separate positions at well-funded institutions in comfortable cities. She had turned all 3 down. She had spent 11 years building this facility with donated materials and volunteer staff, and had treated over 40,000 patients who otherwise would have had no access to care. When asked in an interview why she kept going through the difficult years, she had said, because I decided it was worth it, and I do not change my mind about things that are worth it. Same mechanism, said Vokrath quietly. Exactly the same psychological mechanism as the businessman who burned everything down on principle. The difference is only direction. He looked at his students. This is what makes humans difficult to model. Not their strength, not their adaptability, their commitment. Once a human decides something is worth their full effort, neither logic nor cost, nor the opinions of everyone around them, nor the physical limitations of their own biology will reliably stop them. He clicked to a new slide. This one showed medical data. Not dramatic or visual, just columns of numbers and dates and outcomes, but Vokrath walked his students through it slowly, and as he did, the numbers told a story that was in its own quiet way more striking than any photograph. Humans had, over the course of roughly 200 years, taken the average life expectancy of their species from 35 years to over 80. They had eliminated dozens of diseases that had killed hundreds of millions of their people. They had developed surgical techniques of such precision that they routinely repaired damage that would have been fatal a century earlier. They had built organ replacement systems, immune response treatments, and pain management protocols that were Several Galactic Council medical reviews had noted with visible surprise, genuinely competitive with species who had been practicing advanced medicine for 10 times as long. They did this, said Vokrath, while also doing everything else I have described. The wars, the conflicts, the honey badgers and the crocodiles and the frozen wasteland recreation, all of it simultaneously. They were not peaceful and then innovative, they were not stable and then productive. They advanced under pressure, they built things in the middle of difficulty, not after it. He closed the medical data slide. And now, he said, and something in his tone made the room sharpen its attention. We come to the part of the lecture that I do not usually include in the standard curriculum, because I have been given permission as of this morning to do something I have never done in 43 years of teaching this course. He walked to the side of the lecture hall and pressed a panel on the wall. A door opened, and a human walked in. She was, by human standards, fairly average in height, perhaps 1.65 meters. Brown skin, dark hair pulled back in a practical arrangement that suggested she did not spend much time worrying about it, and the kind of relaxed, alert posture that Vokrath had come to understand was standard for humans who had spent significant time in unfamiliar environments and had decided to be comfortable in them anyway. Her name, she had told Vokrath when they arranged this visit, was Yemi Adaora. She was a xenobiological researcher, which Vokrath found wonderfully appropriate, which meant she was a human who studied alien life for a living and had apparently found it interesting enough to make a career out of. She looked at the 23 alien students. They looked at her. She smiled. It was a direct, genuine smile, the kind that reached the eyes and had no performance in it whatsoever. Then she said, in clear Galactic standard that carried only a slight accent from her native language, "Hi, I understand you've been learning about my planet. I'm happy to answer questions. Fair warning, I'll probably have questions for you too. I find all of you extremely interesting." The silence that followed was approximately 4 seconds long. Then Taz, who had not spoken much in either lecture, said in a voice that was just barely above a whisper, "You find us interesting?" "Yes," said Yemi simply. "We are not. Frightening to you?" She tilted her head slightly. "Should you be?" Another pause. Then, slowly, Taz straightened all 4 of his arms, which among Vakari was a sign of considerable respect offered to a recognized equal. It was not a gesture given easily or casually. Yemi did not know what it meant, but she seemed to sense the weight of it because she nodded back to him with the seriousness it deserved. Margot, who had filled more data slates in the last 3 days than in her previous 2 semesters combined, looked at Yemi Adaora standing at the front of Hall 7 like she belonged there, at ease in a room full of alien biology, interested rather than intimidated, and asked the question that had been sitting at the back of her mind since the first lecture. "Does your planet know that we call it a death world?" Yemi laughed. It was a full, easy laugh, completely unguarded. "Yes," she said. "We think it's great." Margot stared. "We've got merchandise," Yemi added, and pulled from her jacket pocket a small printed token, the kind of simple object humans apparently made for sentimental or humorous reasons, on which were printed the words, "SOL3, Death World, come visit, we dare you." Plin made a sound that his species reserved for moments of profound surprise. He hugged his pot of moss. Suvek, who had by this point given up entirely on pretending to be a dispassionate academic observer and was simply experiencing the lecture with her full emotional range, looked at the token and then at Yemi and then at Professor Vokrath, who was standing to the side with his arms folded and the expression of a man watching his best lesson plan execute itself perfectly. "Professor," she said, "I think I understand now." "What do you understand, Suvek?" She thought carefully. Then she said, "The planet did not make them tough, and they did not tame the planet. They just kept going, both of them, together. And after long enough, that became the only thing either of them knew how to do." Vokrath nodded once. "That," he said, "is the most accurate summary of Earth I have heard in 43 years of teaching this course." Yemi looked at Suvek with that same direct, genuine expression she had worn since she walked through the door. "That's a good way to put it," she said. "We've had a lot of practice at not stopping." She sat down on the edge of the lecture table, perfectly comfortable, in a room full of creatures from 11 different star systems, on a space station orbiting a planet that was not her own, and she started asking her questions, and the students one by one started answering them, and Vokrath, standing quietly by the door, realized that the most important part of the lesson had never been on any of his slides. It was the moment when 23 alien students from 11 different worlds stopped studying humans and started talking to one. Because that, he thought, watching Yemi lean forward with bright and genuine curiosity while Taz explained the architectural traditions of the Vakari homeworld, was how humans had always worked. They did not wait to feel safe before they got curious. They got curious first, and somehow, against every reasonable expectation this galaxy had ever produced, it kept working out.